5 days after my heart surgery, still with bandages on my chest and pain shooting through every movement, I heard my daughter Sarah screaming from the kitchen. "Do you think we're your employees? We're not here to serve you." Her husband Mark's voice joined in, venomous and cruel. "Your recovery is not our problem, Margaret. We have our own lives to live. Can you imagine lying in your own bed, weak and vulnerable after major surgery, only to discover that your own family sees caring for you as beneath them? What would you do if the people you sacrificed everything for treated you like a burden in your darkest hour?" I remained silent in that bedroom, listening to their complaints about bringing me water and helping me to the bathroom. But I already knew that within the next 24 hours, my response would forever change not just our family dynamic, but their entire future. My name is Margaret Blackwood. I am 62 years old, and until 3 years ago, I was the senior partner at Blackwood & Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the state. I built that firm from nothing, working 18-hour days for 30 years, missing school plays and soccer games, all so my family could live in comfort and security. When my husband died 5 years ago, I made the decision to step back from active practice and focus on what I thought mattered most, my family. Sarah was my only child, the center of my universe. When she married Mark, I welcomed him as the son I never had. When they struggled with their startup, I invested $200,000 without hesitation. When they wanted to buy their dream house but couldn't qualify for a mortgage, I co-signed and covered the down payment. When their business failed, I quietly covered their debts and brought them to live in my home, the same home where I was now recovering from surgery, the same home where they felt comfortable screaming about my needs being an inconvenience. The irony wasn't lost on me. This house, bought with money I earned working cases that kept me away from family dinners, was now sheltering the very people who saw my vulnerability as an annoyance. The legal mind that had protected hundreds of clients over the decades was now analyzing my own situation with crystal clarity. I had undergone emergency cardiac surgery after a massive heart attack. The doctors said it was stress-related. As I lay there listening to Sarah and Mark complain about having to help me shower and prepare my medications, I realized what that stress had been. The constant giving, the endless sacrifice, the never-ending stream of financial support that had become not appreciation, but expectation. That afternoon, while they were out getting some air, their code for escaping the burden of my presence, I made 3 phone calls from my bedroom. The first was to my banker, Robert Chen, who had handled my accounts for 15 years. The second was to David Morrison, my former partner and still one of the sharpest attorneys in the state. The third was to my private investigator, Elena Rodriguez, who had worked on some of my most complex cases. Each conversation was brief and professional. I had learned long ago that the most powerful moves in law are made quietly, with precision, not drama. By the time Sarah and Mark returned that evening with takeout food, not bothering to ask what I could eat with my dietary restrictions, the wheels were already in motion. They ate in the living room, laughing at some show on television, while I managed to prepare my own meal with trembling hands and a chest that felt like it was being crushed. That's when I heard Sarah tell Mark, "She's being dramatic about the pain. My friend's mother had the same surgery and was fine in 2 days." That night, as I swallowed my pain medication and listened to them discussing their weekend plans that notably didn't include checking on my condition, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just anger or hurt, it was the same cold, analytical fury that had made me one of the most feared litigators in the state. The next morning would bring revelations that would make their complaints about helping me seem insignificant compared to what I was about to discover about their true intentions for my life and my assets. Have you ever had a moment when you realized that your kindness was being mistaken for weakness? Tomorrow, I'll tell you about the conversation I overheard that revealed the depth of their plans and why my response would leave them questioning everything they thought they knew about me. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of hushed voices coming from the kitchen. My chest still ached, but something about their secretive tone made me force myself out of bed. I moved slowly down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floors I had chosen and paid for 15 years ago. What I heard stopped me cold. "Look, babe, she's not going to live forever," Mark was saying. his voice casual as if discussing the weather. The heart attack was a warning. The next one might finish the job. We just need to make sure we're positioned correctly when it happens. Sarah's response cut through me like a scalpel. I know. That's why I had her put me on all the bank accounts last year. She thinks it's for emergencies, but legally I have access to everything. The house is already in both our names, remember? What about the law firm shares? Mark asked. Those are worth at least $3 million. Already handled. When Dad died, she transferred everything to me to avoid probate issues. She wanted to make sure I'd be taken care of if something happened to her. Poor naive Mom doesn't realize I already am. I gripped the wall, my surgical incision screaming in protest, but not as loudly as my heart was screaming from betrayal. The best part, Sarah continued, is that she actually thinks we're here out of love. We haven't paid rent in 2 years. She covers our groceries, our car payments, even our health insurance. Why would we ever leave this setup? Mark laughed, a sound that would haunt me for days. And now she's recovering from surgery, completely dependent on us. This is perfect timing to make sure she doesn't get any ideas about changing her will or taking our names off anything. Exactly. We just need to keep her grateful and dependent. A few more months of playing the devoted daughter and son-in-law, and we'll be set for life. I stood there in my own hallway, in the house where I had raised Sarah, where I had celebrated her first steps and first words, where I had held her through every heartbreak and disappointment. The walls seemed to mock me with family photos showing years of love, sacrifice, and what I now realized was completely one-sided devotion. But here's what Sarah and Mark didn't know about me. 30 years of practicing law had taught me that the most dangerous opponents are the ones who appear wounded and defenseless. They had made the classic mistake that had cost countless adversaries in courtrooms across the country. They underestimated Margaret Blackwood. I made my way back to my bedroom, my mind no longer foggy from pain medication, but sharp as the day I argued my first case. Within an hour, I had made a series of calls that would begin the unraveling of their carefully laid plans. The first call was to my banker, Robert. I need to review all account activity from the past 18 months, I told him, particularly any transactions initiated by Sarah. What he told me made my blood run cold. Over $50,000 in unauthorized withdrawals. Shopping sprees, expensive dinners, even a weekend getaway to Napa Valley, all charged to accounts Sarah claimed were for household emergencies. The second call was to David Morrison. David, I need you to pull all the documentation on the property transfers and account additions I made over the past 2 years. Something's not right. David's voice was careful, professional. Margaret, I advised against some of those transfers at the time, remember? You said you trusted Sarah completely. I remember. Now I need to know exactly what legal position that puts me in. The third call was the most painful, to Elena Rodriguez, my investigator. Elena, I need a complete financial background check on Mark Stevens, and I need to know everything about their activities over the past 6 months. Everything. By noon, I had my answers, and they were worse than I had imagined. Mark Stevens had a history of targeting older women with assets. Before Sarah, he had been briefly married to a widow in Oregon who had mysteriously signed over her late husband's pension benefits before their sudden divorce. Sarah, my brilliant, educated daughter, wasn't a victim of his manipulation. She was his willing partner. Elena's investigation revealed that they had already been house hunting in Malibu, looking at properties worth over $2 million. They had told real estate agents that Sarah was about to inherit significantly and would be paying cash. That evening, as they returned from another day of errands, which I now knew meant meeting with financial advisors about managing their anticipated inheritance, I watched them differently. Sarah kissed my forehead with the same lips that had spoken so casually about my death. Mark brought me tea with the same hands that had been researching how to expedite probate proceedings. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Sarah asked, her voice dripping with false concern. "Much better, darling," I replied, my own voice steady and warm. Much clearer about everything. They had no idea that everything now included detailed knowledge of their plans, their debts, their schemes, and most importantly, their complete legal vulnerability. That night, as they settled in to watch television in my living room, planning their future with my money, I was in my bedroom planning something entirely different. Tomorrow would bring the first phase of their education about what happens when you betray someone who spent 3 decades protecting people from predators exactly like them. But first, I needed one more piece of information, something that would make their downfall not just inevitable, but absolutely devastating. The next morning, while Sarah and Mark were at their weekly job hunting session, which I now knew was actually their meeting with a financial planner to discuss my assets, I did something I hadn't done in months. I drove myself to my old law firm. The drive was painful, my chest tight with every turn, but my mind was clearer than it had been since before the surgery. Pulling into the parking garage, where I had spent countless early mornings and late nights building my career, I felt like I was coming home. Margaret, David Morrison's face lit up when I walked into what used to be my office. "You should be resting. The doctor said at least 2 more weeks of recovery." "David, I need access to our investigative resources. This isn't about rest anymore. This is about survival." I told him everything. The overheard conversation, Elena's findings, the unauthorized withdrawals. David's expression grew darker with each revelation. "Jesus, Margaret, your own daughter. How did we miss this?" Because I was a mother first and a lawyer second, the biggest mistake of my career. I settled into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where I had counseled hundreds of clients facing betrayal by people they trusted. But now I need to be a lawyer first. What are my options? David pulled out a legal pad, his pen moving quickly as we strategized. The unauthorized withdrawals are clear-cut theft. The property transfers might be reversible if we can prove coercion or fraud. But Margaret, we need more evidence of intent. I have an idea about that. That afternoon, I made a call that would prove to be the turning point. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a forensic accountant who had worked on some of our most complex fraud cases, agreed to meet me at my house the next day, while Sarah and Mark were out. "Bring your recording equipment," I told her. "I'm going to get them to confess everything." But first, I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. That evening, I did something that went against every maternal instinct I had ever possessed. I searched Sarah's room. What I found in her laptop bag made my hands shake. Printed emails between Sarah and Mark, dating back 8 months, detailing their strategy. The subject line of one email made my stomach turn. Operation Inheritance, Timeline, and Tactics. The emails revealed a level of calculation that was breathtaking in its cruelty. They had researched my medical history, noting that stress was a major factor in heart disease. They had deliberately created financial pressures and emotional drama to exacerbate my condition. Mark's email from 6 months ago was particularly chilling. "Keep pushing the guilt buttons about money. The more stressed she gets, the sooner we can move to Phase 2. Phase 2, according to their correspondence, involved having me declared mentally incompetent due to stress-related cognitive decline. They had already consulted with a doctor who specialized in elder care assessments, feeding him a carefully crafted narrative about my concerning behaviors and memory issues. But the most devastating discovery was a recorded phone call between Sarah and someone named James Patterson, an estate attorney they had secretly consulted about contesting my will if I didn't die soon enough for their liking. Sarah's voice on the recording was cold, calculating. She's always been emotional and impulsive. If we can document enough instances of erratic behavior, we can argue she wasn't mentally competent when she made her recent financial decisions. I sat in Sarah's childhood bedroom, surrounded by photos of birthday parties I had planned, vacations I had funded, graduation ceremonies I had attended with pride, listening to my daughter plot my legal and financial destruction with the same methodical precision I had once used to destroy opposing counsel in court. The irony was perfect and terrible. Sarah had inherited more than just my assets. She had inherited my strategic mind, my attention to detail, my ability to think 10 steps ahead. She had simply chosen to use those gifts against me. But there was one thing Sarah had forgotten about her inheritance. She had also inherited my contacts, my reputation, and my understanding of exactly how the legal system works when someone with my experience decides to fight back. The next morning, Dr. Harper arrived precisely at 9 a.m., just as Sarah and Mark were leaving for their job interviews. Her briefcase contained equipment that could record conversations from 3 rooms away, completely undetectable. Margaret, are you sure about this? Once we have them on record, there's no going back. I looked at her steadily. Elizabeth, I've spent 30 years listening to people confess their crimes. I know exactly what I'm doing. What happened next would give me everything I needed to destroy their plans completely. But more importantly, it would reveal just how far they were willing to go, and how little they understood about the woman they had chosen to betray. That afternoon, I implemented a strategy that would make everything they had done to me look like child's play compared to what was about to happen to them. The recording equipment was hidden perfectly throughout the house when Sarah and Mark returned from their job interviews that afternoon. Dr. Harper had positioned herself in my study with a clear view of the living room, pretending to review medical documents while the sophisticated recording system captured every word. I had learned from decades of depositions that the best confessions come not from direct confrontation, but from making people feel safe enough to reveal their true intentions. So I played the role I knew they expected, the grateful, dependent mother. Sarah, darling, I've been thinking about our future, I began, settling into my favorite armchair with deliberate frailty. The heart attack really scared me. I want to make sure you and Mark are completely protected if something happens to me. Sarah's eyes lit up, but she maintained her mask of concern. Mom, don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. But I need peace of mind. I want to understand exactly how everything is set up, the house, the accounts, the business assets. Can you walk me through it? Mark leaned forward, unable to hide his eagerness. Of course, Margaret. We want you to feel secure. What followed was 23 minutes of the most damning confession I had ever witnessed in my career. They outlined their access to my accounts, their understanding of my assets, their timeline for managing everything after my death. But then, I asked the question that would destroy them completely. What if I recover fully and live another 20 years? I know that would complicate your plans. The mask slipped completely. Sarah exchanged a look with Mark that would haunt me forever. Well, Mom, Sarah said carefully, at your age, with your health issues, that's not really realistic, is it? The doctor said your heart is severely damaged. Another attack is almost inevitable. But what if it's not? What if I want to travel, maybe sell this house and move somewhere smaller? What if I want to change my will? Mark's response was swift and revealing. Margaret, I think the stress of the surgery might be affecting your judgment. Sarah and I have been discussing this. Maybe it's time to consider having a doctor evaluate your decision-making capacity. We're concerned about your mental state. My mental state? You've been saying some strange things lately, Sarah added, her voice taking on a tone I had never heard before. Cold, calculated, predatory. Forgetting conversations we've had, making irrational financial comments. Mark thinks we should have Dr. Patterson do a cognitive assessment. Dr. Patterson. The same name from their recorded phone conversation about having me declared incompetent. We're just worried about you making any major decisions while you're not thinking clearly, Mark continued. It would be irresponsible of us as your family not to protect you from yourself. I looked at my daughter, the child I had rocked to sleep, taught to ride a bicycle, sent to the best schools, supported through every challenge and heartbreak, and saw a stranger. Not just a stranger, but a predator who had been living in my house, eating my food, accepting my care, while systematically planning my destruction. So you think I'm mentally incompetent? We think you need help, Sarah said, her hand reaching out to pat mine with false tenderness. And we want to make sure you get the best care possible. There are excellent facilities for people with cognitive decline. Facilities. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning to have me committed. That's very thoughtful of you both, I said quietly. Very thoughtful indeed. That evening, after they had gone to bed, Dr. Harper and I reviewed the recordings. 23 minutes of clear, unambiguous evidence of elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. Margaret, this is criminal behavior. We have them discussing theft, manipulation, and plans to have you falsely declared incompetent. This recording could put them in prison. But I wasn't thinking about prison. I was thinking about something far more devastating to people like Sarah and Mark. Complete and utter financial ruin, public humiliation, and the loss of everything they had counted on. Elizabeth, tomorrow I want you to call Judge Harrison's office. I'm going to need an emergency hearing for Thursday morning. What kind of hearing? A competency hearing, I'm going to beat them to it. The next day, while Sarah and Mark were out celebrating what they believed was their successful manipulation of their mentally declining mother, I was meeting with Judge Harrison, presenting the recordings, and requesting an immediate judicial review of my mental capacity. Mrs. Blackwood, these recordings are deeply disturbing. You're requesting a competency evaluation on yourself? Yes, Your Honor. I want it on the record, before witnesses, that I am of completely sound mind. I want medical experts to testify to my cognitive capacity. And then I want to present evidence of what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness. What Sarah and Mark didn't know was that by Thursday morning, they would be sitting in a courtroom, under oath, having to explain to a judge why they had been caught on recording discussing the theft of assets from a woman who was about to be declared completely mentally competent by the state's leading neuropsychologist. If you've ever believed that justice was just a concept in books and movies, stay with me. Because what happened in that courtroom would prove that sometimes the good guys really do win, especially when the good guys have 30 years of legal experience and absolutely nothing left to lose. Thursday morning arrived with crystal clarity, both in the weather and in my mind. As I sat in Judge Harrison's chambers at 8 a.m., dressed in my best navy suit that still fit perfectly despite the weight I had lost during recovery, I felt like the lawyer I had always been, not the victim I had temporarily become. Mrs. Blackwood, Dr. Patricia Williams, the state's leading neuropsychologist, concluded after 3 hours of comprehensive testing, your cognitive function is not only normal for your age, it's exceptional. Your memory, reasoning ability, and decision-making capacity are all in the superior range. There is absolutely no evidence of any mental decline whatsoever. Judge Harrison nodded grimly. And the recordings, Mrs. Blackwood? I placed the transcript on his desk. 23 pages of documented conversation where my daughter and son-in-law discussed my supposed mental incompetence, their plans to have me committed, and their detailed knowledge of assets they had no legal right to access. Your Honor, this isn't just theft. This is a sophisticated elder abuse scheme that includes financial fraud, coercion, and conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud. But the real bombshell came when Elena Rodriguez presented her complete investigation report. Your Honor, Mr. Stevens has done this before, 3 times to be exact. In Oregon, he married Helen Morrison, a 70-year-old widow. Within 6 months, she had signed over her deceased husband's pension benefits and the deed to her home. She died of a stress-induced stroke shortly after discovering he was having an affair with a woman named Jennifer Walsh. My blood ran cold. Jennifer Walsh? Yes, ma'am. Jennifer Walsh is Mr. Stevens's legal wife. He never divorced her. His marriage to Sarah Blackwood is completely fraudulent. The room went silent. Judge Harrison looked up from the documents, his expression dark. Are you telling me that Mr. Stevens is a bigamist? Yes, Your Honor. And Jennifer Walsh has been receiving financial support from money stolen from Mrs. Blackwood's accounts. We have bank records showing transfers to accounts under Jennifer's name, funded by the unauthorized withdrawals from Mrs. Blackwood's accounts. I felt the last piece of my maternal heart break and then immediately transform into something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Sarah wasn't just stealing from me. She was helping a career criminal who was already married to someone else. There's more, Your Honor, Elena continued. Sarah Blackwood has been researching elder care facilities that specialize in patients with dementia and Alzheimer's. She's been in contact with Sunset Manor, discussing admission requirements for a patient with rapidly declining cognitive function. The admission paperwork is already prepared. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair. Mrs. Blackwood, do you understand what this means? Yes, Your Honor. They weren't just planning to steal my money. They were planning to have me committed to a memory care facility based on fraudulent medical claims, then take control of all my assets while I was locked away, unable to defend myself. The plan was breathtaking in its cruelty and sophistication. Once I was declared incompetent and committed, Mark, as my son-in-law and Sarah's husband, would have legal standing to manage my affairs. Sarah, as my only child and designated power of attorney, would control all decisions about my care and finances. Together they could sell my house, liquidate my investments, and drain my accounts while I was trapped in a facility, possibly medicated into compliance. Your Honor, I want them arrested. Today. Mrs. Blackwood, I understand your anger, But we need to be strategic here. Criminal charges are one thing, but if we're going to completely destroy their scheme, we need to be smarter than they've been. That's when David Morrison presented the final piece of our counter-strategy. Your Honor, Mrs. Blackwood has spent the last week not just gathering evidence, but also making some strategic financial moves. She's created an irrevocable trust, transferred all major assets into protected accounts, and established a legal framework that makes it impossible for Sarah or Mark to access anything, regardless of any future competency claims. But there's more, I added. I've also discovered that they've been using my credit cards, my accounts, and my name to secure loans and make purchases that total over $300,000. Money they've spent on luxury items, vacations, and supporting Mark's other wife. Judge Harrison shook his head. This is elder abuse on a scale I've rarely seen. Mrs. Blackwood, what do you want to happen here? I want justice, Your Honor. Complete and total justice. What I didn't tell Judge Harrison was that justice, in my mind, wasn't just about criminal charges. It was about making sure that Sarah and Mark faced consequences that would follow them for the rest of their lives. That afternoon, while they were out planning what they thought was my future in a memory care facility, I was planning their future in a very different kind of institution. But first, I had one final card to play, something that would make their betrayal not just criminal, but public. By 5 p.m. that day, Sarah and Mark would return home to find their entire world had changed. The house they thought they owned, the accounts they thought they controlled, the future they thought they had secured, all of it would be gone. But the real surprise was waiting for them in the driveway. At exactly 4:30 p.m., I positioned myself in the living room with a clear view of the driveway. Dr. Harper sat in the kitchen with her recording equipment still running. David Morrison was in my study, preparing the final legal documents. And Elena Rodriguez was stationed outside in an unmarked car, ready to document everything that was about to unfold. The trap I had spent a week setting was perfect in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. At 4:45, Sarah and Mark's car pulled into the driveway, but instead of the empty driveway they expected, they found 2 additional vehicles waiting, a black sedan with government plates and a white van marked County Sheriff's Department, Digital Forensics Unit. I watched through the window as they sat in their car for a full minute, confusion and fear playing across their faces. Mark was gesturing angrily, probably asking Sarah what was happening. Sarah was staring at the house like she was seeing it for the first time. They had no idea that while they were at Sunset Manor signing fraudulent admission paperwork for my commitment, I was at the courthouse obtaining warrants for their arrest. They finally got out of the car, moving slowly, whispering to each other. As they reached the front door, I opened it before they could use their keys. "Hello, darlings. We need to talk." Sarah's face was pale. "Mom, what's going on? Whose cars are those? Please, come in. There are some people here who want to meet you." Detective James Crawford emerged from the living room, his badge clearly visible. Behind him came Agent Lisa Chen from the district attorney's office, and Dr. Harper with her equipment case. "Sarah Stevens and Mark Stevens," Detective Crawford announced formally. "You're under arrest for elder abuse, financial fraud, theft, conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud, and bigamy." The look on Sarah's face was something I will never forget. Not just shock or fear, but the sudden realization that everything she thought she knew about her mother was wrong. "Mom, what did you do?" Sarah whispered. "I did what I should have done the moment I heard you discussing my death like a business opportunity," I replied calmly. "I protected myself." Mark tried to run. He actually bolted for the back door, but Elena had anticipated that. She was waiting in the backyard with 2 additional officers. They brought him back in handcuffs within 3 minutes. "You think you're so smart?" Mark snarled at me as they cuffed him. "Sarah is your daughter. She'll inherit everything anyway when you die." Detective Crawford looked at him with disgust. "Mr. Stevens, you might want to listen to what Mrs. Blackwood has to say before you make any more threats." I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a thick legal document. "This is an irrevocable trust, executed 3 days ago, transferring all my assets to the Blackwood Foundation for elder protection. Sarah, you're not inheriting a single dollar." Sarah's legs gave out. She actually collapsed into the chair, staring at me like I had become someone else entirely. "But Mom, I'm your daughter. I'm your only family." No, Sarah. Family doesn't plot the mental destruction of someone they love. Family doesn't steal and lie and conspire with bigamists to destroy the person who sacrificed everything for them. Agent Chen stepped forward with her own folder. Ms. Stevens, we also need to inform you that your marriage to Mark Stevens is legally invalid. He's already married to Jennifer Walsh in Oregon. You've been unknowingly participating in bigamy. The color drained completely from Sarah's face. That's impossible. We had a ceremony. We have a marriage license. The license is fraudulent, Elena added, entering from the kitchen. Mark used false identification when he applied for it. His real name is Marcus Steinberg, and he has warrants out for similar schemes in 3 other states. I watched my daughter's entire reality crumble in real time. The man she thought she had married didn't exist. The future she had planned was built on lies. The mother she thought she could manipulate had outsmarted her completely. Sarah, you have one chance to minimize the damage to yourself, David Morrison said, stepping forward with another document. You can cooperate fully with the investigation, return every stolen dollar, and testify against Marcus, whatever his real name is. Or you can go down with him. But Sarah wasn't looking at David. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. Pure, unadulterated hatred. You vindictive old bitch, she hissed. I am your daughter. I gave up years of my life taking care of you, and this is how you repay me? The officers moved to restrain her, but I held up my hand. Let her talk. I want this on record. You want to destroy me over money? Over some stupid comments we made when we were stressed about your health? You're going to send your own daughter to prison? I looked at her steadily, this stranger who shared my DNA but none of my values. Sarah, you weren't stressed about my health. You were frustrated that I wasn't dying fast enough for your convenience. There's a difference. Detective Crawford began reading them their rights as the handcuffs clicked into place. But I had one more thing to say. Sarah, I want you to understand something. I didn't destroy your life. You destroyed it yourself the moment you decided that my love and sacrifice meant nothing compared to your greed. I just made sure there would be consequences. As they led her toward the door, Sarah turned back one last time. This isn't over, Mother. I smiled at her, not with warmth, but with the cold satisfaction of someone who had just executed a perfect legal strategy. Oh, darling, yes it is. It's completely over. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. But tonight, for the first time in months, I would sleep peacefully in my own home, knowing that the people who had plotted my destruction were exactly where they belonged. The silence in my house that evening was profound and beautiful. For the first time in 2 years, I was completely alone, and it felt like freedom. But my work wasn't finished. Sarah and Mark's arrest was just the beginning. Now came the systematic dismantling of every lie they had built, every scheme they had constructed, every assumption they had made about my money and my life. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive bottle Sarah had bought with my credit card 3 weeks ago, and settled at my dining room table with stacks of financial documents that would determine their future. David Morrison had stayed after the arrests to help me understand the full scope of what we had uncovered. The numbers were staggering. Margaret, they've been systematically draining your accounts for 18 months. The total theft is $467,000. Show me everything. He spread the bank statements across the table, like evidence in a murder trial. Luxury handbags, jewelry, expensive dinners. A weekend in Paris that Sarah had told me was a work conference. Spa treatments, designer clothes, and monthly payments to something called JW Enterprises. JW Enterprises is Jennifer Walsh's consulting company, Elena had discovered. Sarah was unknowingly funding Mark's real wife's business with your money. The irony was breathtaking. My daughter had been working to steal my assets to support the business of her husband's actual wife. She had been so focused on the big prize, my house, my investments, my life insurance, that she never bothered to investigate who she was really helping. But the financial theft was only part of the story. David had also uncovered something that made my blood boil with a cold, calculating rage. Margaret, they took out 3 life insurance policies on you over the past year. Each one is for $500,000, with Sarah as the beneficiary. Life insurance policies? Without my knowledge? They forged your signature. used copies of your identification that Sarah had access to. The insurance companies never questioned it because Sarah provided all your personal information and medical history. $1.5 million. They had been betting on my death to the tune of $1.5 million, on top of everything else they planned to steal. David, I want those policies canceled immediately, and I want the insurance companies to know exactly how those signatures were obtained. Already in process. The insurance fraud charges alone will add 5 years to their sentences. But there was more. Elena's investigation had revealed that Marcus, had been using my home address to establish credit accounts, open business licenses, and even file tax returns claiming residence in my house. He's been running a complete identity theft operation from your guest bedroom, Elena explained, using your address, your Wi-Fi, your utility bills as proof of residence. He has 7 credit cards, 2 business loans, and a line of credit totaling over $200,000, all tied to your home. The guest bedroom where I had welcomed him as a son. The same room where he had planned my mental destruction while building a false financial empire using my reputation and address. There's something else, Margaret, David said quietly. The house. What about the house? Sarah didn't just add her name to the deed. She changed the ownership structure. On paper, you currently own 25% of your own home. She owns 75%. The wine glass trembled in my hand. How is that possible? She had you sign papers during your hospital stay, told you they were for emergency access. You were heavily medicated, barely conscious from the surgery. She took advantage of your vulnerability to essentially steal your house. I thought back to those hazy days after the surgery, when Sarah had brought me papers to sign for insurance purposes and just in case something happens. I had trusted her completely, signing whatever she put in front of me while I drifted in and out of consciousness. David, can we reverse that? We're going to do more than reverse it. We're going to make sure she faces consequences for every fraudulent signature, every forged document, every illegal transfer. That night, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible to me just a week earlier. I was going to destroy them completely, not out of revenge, but out of justice. People like Sarah and Mark didn't stop until they were stopped. The only way to protect other families from what they had done to me was to make sure they faced consequences so severe that they would never consider doing it again. I called my insurance agent, my credit monitoring service, my bank, and every financial institution I had ever worked with. By morning, every account would be frozen, every card canceled, every automatic payment stopped. I was going to force them to account for every stolen dollar while they sat in jail. But the real surprise was still coming. Tomorrow, Sarah and Mark would discover that the $4.8 million they thought they were inheriting didn't just disappear into a trust. It had been transformed into something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. If you've ever wondered what real justice looks like when someone with resources and intelligence decides to fight back against people who mistake kindness for weakness, you're about to find out. Because what I did with that money would ensure that Sarah and Mark's names would be permanently associated with their crimes in a way that would follow them forever. Friday morning brought a call that would begin the most satisfying phase of my entire plan. Jennifer Walsh, Mark's real wife, was calling from Oregon. Mrs. Blackwood, this is Jennifer Walsh. I need to speak with you about Marcus. Marcus? Mark Stevens. That's not his real name. I've been married to Marcus Steinberg for 12 years. I had no idea he was living with your daughter until the police contacted me yesterday. The conversation that followed revealed the true scope of Marcus's operation. Jennifer wasn't just another victim. She was a willing participant who had been receiving monthly payments from my stolen money to fund her silence and cooperation. He told me he was working as a financial consultant for wealthy elderly clients, Jennifer explained, her voice shaking. He said the money was commissions from investment management. I never asked questions because we needed the income. Jennifer, that money was stolen from me by your husband and my daughter. You've been living off the proceeds of elder abuse for over a year. The silence on the phone was deafening. Mrs. Blackwood, I can give you everything. Bank records, emails, recordings of our conversations. I never wanted to be part of this. I needed the money. Within 2 hours, Jennifer Walsh was on a plane to testify against the man she had married and the scheme she had unknowingly supported. Her cooperation would add another layer of evidence that would make Sarah and Mark's convictions absolutely certain. But that afternoon brought the piece of news that would make everything else seem insignificant. Dr. Harper called with results from the digital forensics analysis of Sarah's laptop and Mark's phone. "Margaret, you need to sit down for this." "I'm already sitting." "They weren't just planning to steal your money. They were planning to kill you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What did you say?" "We found internet searches on Mark's phone for untraceable poisons, medications that could cause heart attacks, and ways to make murder look like natural death in elderly patients. Sarah's laptop has browser history showing research into medications that could be added to food without detection." My hands went numb. The tea Sarah had brought me every morning, the medications she had helped me organize, the meals she had prepared with such apparent care. "Dr. Harper, were they actually poisoning me? We're running tests on hair samples and blood work from your hospital stay. But Margaret, there's more. We found a recording on Mark's phone, a conversation between him and Sarah from 2 weeks ago." She played the recording. Sarah's voice was clinical, detached. "The heart attack was a gift. If we can trigger another one, it solves all our problems. No waiting for natural death, no risk of her changing her mind about the money, no chance of her discovering our plans." Mark's response was equally chilling. "The medication adjustments should do it. Dr. Patterson said the combination I suggested would put massive stress on her cardiovascular system. If she has another attack within the next month, it will look completely natural." I sat in my kitchen, listening to my daughter discuss my murder with the same tone she might use to plan a dinner party. The medications they had been helping me with weren't just stolen money and forged documents. They were attempted murder. "Dr. Harper, I want them charged with attempted murder. The DA is already preparing those charges. But Margaret, this changes everything. They weren't just planning financial fraud. They were planning to kill you and make it look like natural death." That evening, David Morrison came to my house with documents that would finalize my response to their attempted murder. "Margaret, the Blackwood Foundation for Elder Protection is now fully established with $4.8 million in assets. But I think you should know what we're planning to do with that money." The foundation's mission statement was elegant in its justice: to provide legal defense for elderly victims of family financial abuse, to fund investigations into elder care fraud, and to maintain a permanent public database of convicted elder abusers. "The database will be searchable by name," David explained. "Anyone who Googles Sarah Blackwood or Mark Stevens or Marcus Steinberg will find their complete criminal history, their photographs, their convictions, and the details of their crimes. Forever." But the real masterstroke was the Foundation's first major initiative, a scholarship program named the Sarah Blackwood Memorial Scholarship for Ethics in Elder Care. "Memorial Scholarship?" I asked. "As far as the public record is concerned, Sarah Blackwood died the day she decided to murder her mother for money. The scholarship will be awarded annually to students who demonstrate exceptional integrity in caring for elderly family members. Every recipient will receive a letter explaining that the scholarship exists because Sarah Blackwood chose greed over love, attempted murder over compassion. Her name would be permanently associated with the worst kind of family betrayal, preserved forever in academic records, scholarship databases, and public documents. Every student who received that scholarship would know exactly what happens when someone betrays the parent who sacrificed everything for them. David, it's perfect. There's one more thing. We're establishing the scholarship at the university where Sarah got her business degree. Every year, at the awards ceremony, they'll read the full story of why this scholarship exists. Her professors, her classmates, everyone who knew her will hear exactly what she became. That night, I called Sarah's bail bondsman to let him know I would not be posting her bail. She would remain in jail until trial, giving her plenty of time to think about the life she had thrown away for money she would never see. The next morning would bring the final phase of their education, the moment when they realized that destroying me had accomplished nothing except destroying themselves completely and permanently. If you've ever believed that people who hurt their families should face consequences that follow them forever, tomorrow you'll see exactly what that looks like when someone with resources and determination decides that justice means more than just punishment. It means permanent accountability. Saturday morning brought the call I had been waiting for. Sarah's court-appointed attorney wanted to discuss a plea deal. Mrs. Blackwood, my client is willing to plead guilty to the financial charges in exchange for dropping the attempted murder charges. She's also prepared to make full restitution. Tell me something, counselor. Does your client understand that she doesn't have any money to make restitution with? She believes she has inheritance rights that could cover. She has no inheritance rights. None whatsoever. The foundation owns everything now. The silence on the phone told me everything I needed to know. Sarah still didn't understand that I had permanently removed every dollar from her reach. Mrs. Blackwood, perhaps we could arrange a meeting. I think if you spoke with Sarah directly, you might find room for compassion. Absolutely. I'll be there this afternoon. The county jail visiting room was exactly as I remembered from the times I had met clients there during my practicing years. Cold, institutional, designed to strip away dignity and hope. Sarah sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, her hair unwashed, her face pale and drawn. But her eyes still held defiance. "So, you came to gloat," she said flatly. "I came to offer you something your attorney thinks you want. One final chance to explain yourself." Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You really think you've won, don't you? You think you've outsmarted me completely." "Sarah, I'm not here to argue about winning or losing. I'm here because despite everything you've done, you're still my daughter, and I want to understand how we got here." For a moment her mask slipped, and I saw something that might have been genuine emotion. "How we got here? Really, Mom? You want to know how we got here?" "Yes. We got here because you spent my entire childhood loving your career more than you loved me. We got here because every school play, every soccer game, every moment that mattered to me, you were in some courtroom fighting for strangers instead of being with your own daughter." Her words hit their target, but I had spent a week preparing for this conversation. "And that justifies attempting to murder me?" "We weren't going to murder you." The words exploded out of her, loud enough to make the guard look over. We needed you to— To what, Sarah? Die conveniently? Have another heart attack at exactly the right time for your financial planning?" She stared at me, realizing she had just confirmed what the recordings had already proven. "Mom, you don't understand the pressure we were under. Mark's business failed. We had debts. You needed money, so you decided to steal mine. And when that wasn't fast enough, you decided to kill me for it. It wasn't supposed to be like that. The medications were just supposed to make you weaker, more dependent, so you'd rely on us more. The heart attack was an accident." Another confession, recorded by the device Elena had given me. Sarah was systematically destroying any possibility of a plea deal with every word. "Sarah, do you understand what you just told me? You just admitted to deliberately poisoning me." The blood drained from her face as she realized what she had said. "Mom, I didn't mean— That's exactly what you meant. You poisoned your own mother to make her weak enough to steal from and eventually kill." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to the tone I had used in courtrooms when I was about to destroy an opposing witness. "But here's what you still don't understand, Sarah. You didn't just steal money from me. You didn't just plan to murder me. You destroyed something far more valuable than any amount of money." "What are you talking about?" "You destroyed the last 30 years of my life. Every memory I had of raising a daughter I loved, every sacrifice I made thinking I was building something for my family, every moment of pride I felt watching you grow up, you destroyed all of it. You turned my entire life as a mother into a lie." For the first time since this all began, I saw genuine pain in her eyes. "Mom, I never meant to." "Yes, you did. You meant every bit of it. You planned it, executed it, and celebrated it. The only thing you didn't mean to do was get caught." I stood up to leave, but I had one more thing to say. "Sarah, I want you to understand something about the foundation I created with the money you thought you would inherit. Every year, on the anniversary of your arrest, that foundation will give away more money to help elderly victims than you could have spent in a lifetime. Your greed didn't just cost you your inheritance, it turned your inheritance into a permanent monument to your failure as a human being." "Mom, please, I'm your daughter. I'm your only family." I looked at her for the last time, this stranger who shared my DNA but none of my values. "No, Sarah, My daughter died the day she decided that my money was worth more than my life. You're just someone who happens to look like her. As I walked toward the door, she called out one last time, "Mom, wait. What about forgiveness? What about family? What about love?" I turned back, my voice steady and final. You should have thought about love before you tried to murder the person who loved you most. The next day would bring the final resolution, the moment when Sarah and Mark would learn exactly what their futures held, and when I would finally close the door on the most painful chapter of my life. 3 months later, I sat in the front row of the courthouse where I had spent so many years fighting for justice. Today, justice was being served for me. The trial had been swift and decisive. With the recordings, the financial evidence, the digital forensics, and Jennifer Walsh's testimony, Sarah and Mark's defense attorneys had advised them to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty on the attempted murder charges. But I had insisted on a full trial. The world needed to hear exactly what they had done. Judge Harrison looked down at Sarah and Mark as they stood to receive their sentences. Sarah had lost 30 pounds, her hair had gone prematurely gray, and she looked decades older than her 32 years. Mark looked like exactly what he was, a career criminal who had finally been caught. In 30 years on the bench, Judge Harrison began, I have never encountered a case of elder abuse this calculated, this cruel, or this comprehensive. You didn't just steal money from Mrs. Blackwood. You systematically destroyed her trust, exploited her vulnerability after major surgery, and planned her murder for financial gain. The courtroom was packed. Local news crews, legal professionals, and representatives from elder advocacy groups had come to witness what the district attorney was calling the most comprehensive elder abuse prosecution in state history. Sarah Blackwood, you are sentenced to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for attempted murder, elder abuse, financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Marcus Steinberg, also known as Mark Stevens, you are sentenced to 30 years in prison without possibility of parole for the same charges, plus bigamy and running a continuing criminal enterprise. Sarah collapsed. She actually fell to her knees in the defendant's dock, sobbing uncontrollably. Mark stood stone-faced, staring at me with pure hatred. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. Additionally, both defendants are ordered to pay full restitution in the amount of $1.2 million, including the stolen funds, fraudulent insurance policies, and punitive damages. Since neither defendant has any assets, this restitution will be collected through garnishment of any future earnings for the remainder of their natural lives. The gavel came down with finality. Sarah would spend the next 25 years in prison. Mark would spend 30 years. Neither would ever see freedom before they were elderly themselves. But the real justice came after the sentencing, when David Morrison stood to make a final statement. Your Honor, Mrs. Blackwood has asked me to announce the establishment of the Blackwood Foundation's first major initiative. The foundation will be funding a new elder abuse prosecution unit in the district attorney's office, providing resources to investigate and prosecute cases exactly like this one. Additionally, the foundation has endowed a chair at the State University's Criminology Department specifically focused on elder abuse prevention. The Sarah Blackwood Memorial Chair for Ethics in Elder Care will ensure that future generations of social workers, attorneys, and healthcare professionals understand the devastating impact of family financial abuse. Sarah's head snapped up at the mention of her name. The look on her face when she realized that her name would be permanently associated with elder abuse education was something I will treasure forever. Judge Harrison nodded approvingly. Mrs. Blackwood, would you like to make a statement? I stood slowly, looking directly at Sarah and Mark for what I knew would be the last time. Your Honor, I spent 30 years in this courthouse fighting for justice for other people. I never imagined I would need to fight for justice for myself against my own family. But what I learned through this experience is that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention. I turned to face the packed courtroom, the news cameras, the advocates who had come to witness this moment. Elder abuse happens because predators believe that age makes people vulnerable and powerless. Sarah and Mark made that mistake about me. They thought that because I was recovering from surgery, because I loved my daughter, because I trusted my family, I would be an easy target. My voice grew stronger as I continued. They were wrong. And I want every potential elder abuser watching this to understand that they will be wrong too. Older adults have resources, experience, networks, and the kind of patience that comes from decades of life experience. We are not easy targets. We are dangerous opponents when we decide to fight back. The courtroom erupted in applause. Sarah was crying so hard the bailiff had to support her. Mark was staring at me with the kind of rage that comes from complete defeat. But most importantly, I concluded, I want other families to know that love is not weakness, trust is not stupidity, and kindness is not vulnerability. The people who exploit those qualities are the weak ones. They are the ones who will face consequences. They are the ones who will be remembered for their failures. As they led Sarah and Mark away in shackles, Sarah turned back one final time. "Mom, I'm sorry," she called out, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her steadily, feeling nothing but relief that this chapter was finally closed. "I know you are, Sarah. You're sorry you got caught." The next day, newspapers across the country would carry the story of the daughter who tried to murder her mother for money and the mother who destroyed her completely in response. But more importantly, the Blackwood Foundation would begin its work ensuring that what happened to me would become harder and harder for predators to do to other families. Tomorrow, I would wake up in my own home, completely free, completely secure, and completely at peace with the knowledge that justice had been served in exactly the proportions it deserved. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a call that brought me more satisfaction than any legal victory I had ever achieved in my career. "Mrs. Blackwood, this is Warden Patricia Collins from the Women's Correctional Facility. I'm calling about your daughter." "What about her?" "She's been placed in protective custody. The other inmates learned about her crimes from the news coverage. Apparently, several of them have elderly mothers, and they didn't take kindly to someone who tried to murder her own mother for money. Prison justice." Sarah was discovering that even among criminals, there are lines you don't cross. Attempting to murder your own mother for inheritance money was apparently one of them. "How is she handling it?" "Not well. She's been requesting to speak with you. She says she has information about other victims of her husband's schemes. She wants to make a deal." "Tell her I said no." "Mrs. Blackwood, she's claiming that if you don't visit her, she'll commit suicide." I paused for a moment, remembering the daughter I had raised, the child I had loved unconditionally for 32 years. "Warden Collins, my daughter made her choices. Whatever consequences follow from those choices are hers to face. I will not be manipulated by suicide threats from someone who tried to murder me." "Understood, ma'am." But the call that truly demonstrated the long-term consequences of their actions came 2 weeks later from Jennifer Walsh. "Mrs. Blackwood, I thought you should know. The IRS finished their audit of Marcus's fake businesses. He owes over $400,000 in back taxes, penalties, and interest. Since we were legally married, I'm liable for half of that debt. What does that mean for you? It means I'll be paying his tax debt for the rest of my life. My wages are being garnished, my house is in foreclosure, and my credit is destroyed. I lost my job when my employer found out about my connection to the case." Jennifer Walsh, who had been receiving stolen money from my accounts, was now facing financial ruin that would follow her for decades. The money she had lived on was gone. The man she had married was in prison, and the debts he had created in both their names would haunt her until she died. "Mrs. Blackwood, I know this doesn't change what happened to you, but I want you to know that we're all paying for what Marcus did. We're all suffering consequences." "Good," I said simply. "That's how justice works." But the most satisfying consequence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Patricia Morrison, the university president where Sarah had earned her business degree, called to invite me to the first Sarah Blackwood Memorial Scholarship Award ceremony. "Mrs. Blackwood, I think you should be here to see this." The ceremony was held in the university's largest auditorium, packed with students, faculty, and members of the community. When Dr. Morrison stood to present the scholarship, she didn't just announce the winner, she told the entire story. The Sarah Blackwood Memorial Scholarship exists to honor the memory of a woman who made the worst possible choice when faced with a moral decision. Sarah Blackwood chose greed over love, murder over compassion, and betrayal over loyalty. She attempted to kill her own mother for money. The auditorium was silent as Dr. Morrison continued. This scholarship is awarded to students who demonstrate the exact opposite of Sarah Blackwood's choices. Students who show integrity in caring for elderly family members, who choose sacrifice over selfishness, who understand that family loyalty is more valuable than money. The first recipient was Maria Santos, a 20-year-old nursing student who had dropped out of school for 2 years to care for her grandmother with Alzheimer's disease. "Maria," Dr. Morrison announced, "you represent everything that Sarah Blackwood was not. Your grandmother is alive and well today because you chose love over convenience, sacrifice over selfishness." As Maria accepted the scholarship check, funded with money Sarah thought she would inherit, I felt a sense of completion that no legal victory had ever provided. Sarah's name would forever be associated with the worst kind of family betrayal. Every year, a new student would receive money that should have been hers, given specifically because they had chosen to be everything she had refused to be. But the ultimate consequence was revealed in a letter I received from Elena Rodriguez 3 months later. "Margaret, I thought you should know. Sarah has been writing letters to wealthy, elderly inmates' families, claiming she has information about financial crimes that could help them recover stolen assets. She's trying to run cons from prison." Even behind bars, facing 25 years in prison, Sarah was still trying to exploit elderly people for money. She had learned nothing. She felt no genuine remorse. She was exactly the predator I had always suspected she was. That night, I sat in my beautiful home, the home she would never inherit, never live in, never profit from, and felt a deep sense of peace. I had not just protected myself from her schemes. I had protected every elderly person she might have targeted in the future. The foundation was growing stronger every month, funding investigations, prosecutions, and educational programs. Sarah's name was permanently linked to elder abuse awareness. Mark was rotting in prison, facing decades behind bars, and I was free, completely, permanently, beautifully free. Tomorrow would bring the final chapter of this story, not an ending, but a beginning. Because the most important consequence of Sarah and Mark's betrayal wasn't their punishment. It was what I chose to do with the rest of my life. Now that I finally understood the difference between family and people who simply share your DNA. 1 year after Sarah and Mark's sentencing, I stood in the conference room of what used to be Blackwood and Associates, looking out at a view I had thought I would never see again. The law firm was being transformed into the headquarters of the Blackwood Foundation, and I was coming out of retirement. "Margaret, are you sure about this?" David Morrison asked, as we reviewed the Foundation's expansion plans. "You've already accomplished more in 1 year than most organizations achieve in a decade." I smiled, feeling more energetic and purposeful than I had in years. "David, I spent 3 years in semi-retirement, trying to be the perfect mother and grandmother to people who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. I'm done wasting my life on people who don't deserve it." The foundation had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We had funded 17 elder abuse prosecutions, helped recover over $8 million in stolen assets, and established elder abuse prosecution units in 6 states. But more importantly, we had created a network of protection that was making it harder and harder for predators like Sarah and Mark to succeed. "The university called," David continued. "They want to establish a full degree program in elder advocacy, funded by the foundation. They're calling it the Margaret Blackwood School of Elder Justice. My name, not Sarah's, would be associated with protecting families. My legacy would be justice, not betrayal." But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Harper knocked on the conference room door, carrying a file that would prove just how far-reaching our impact had become. "Margaret, you need to see this. We just received a call from the FBI. They've been tracking a network of elder abuse schemes across 12 states, and our prosecution methods are being used as the model for federal cases." She opened the file to reveal photographs and case summaries of dozens of arrests. Children who had stolen from aging parents, caregivers who had exploited vulnerable seniors, and financial predators who had targeted elderly victims. They're calling it the Blackwood Protocol. Every one of these cases was investigated and prosecuted using the methods we developed for Sarah and Mark's case. The Blackwood Protocol. a systematic approach to elder abuse prosecution that was being used across the country to protect families from the kind of predators who had nearly destroyed me. But there's something else, Dr. Harper continued. 3 of the people arrested in these cases specifically mentioned Sarah and Mark's case. Apparently, the publicity around their sentencing scared them enough to confess and cooperate rather than face the kind of comprehensive investigation we did. Sarah and Mark's public destruction was preventing other families from facing the same betrayal. Their complete downfall was protecting people they would never meet from crimes they might have committed. That afternoon, I received a visitor who reminded me that justice is not just about punishment, it's about healing. Maria Santos, the first recipient of the Sarah Blackwood Memorial Scholarship, had graduated with honors and been accepted to law school. Mrs. Blackwood, I wanted to thank you personally. The scholarship didn't just pay for my education, it taught me what real family loyalty looks like. Tell me about your grandmother, Maria. She's 93 now, still living independently, still sharp as a tack. When people ask me why I spent 2 years caring for her instead of focusing on my career, I tell them about Sarah Blackwood. I tell them what happens when you choose money over love. Maria had learned the lesson Sarah had refused to learn, that taking care of family isn't a burden, it's a privilege. That sacrifice creates strength, not weakness. That love is the only inheritance that truly matters. As evening approached, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible a year ago. I called Elena Rodriguez. Elena, I want you to stop monitoring Sarah's prison communications. I don't need to know what she's doing or saying anymore. Are you sure, Margaret? She's still trying to run scams from prison. I'm sure. Whatever Sarah does with the rest of her life is no longer my concern. She's not my daughter anymore. She's just someone I used to know. For the first time in a year, I would go to sleep without thinking about Sarah, without wondering what she was planning, without feeling the weight of her betrayal. She had given me the greatest gift of all, though she never intended it. She had freed me from the burden of loving someone who was incapable of loving me back. That night, I sat in my beautiful home, the home that was now truly mine, protected by trusts and foundations that would ensure it served justice long after I was gone, and reflected on what I had learned. People like Sarah and Mark exist in every family, every community, every generation. They see kindness as weakness, love as opportunity, and trust as stupidity. But they are wrong about one crucial thing. They believe that good people are helpless against their schemes. I had spent 30 years protecting other people's families in courtrooms across the country. It took my own family's betrayal to teach me the most important lesson of my legal career. Sometimes the most important case you'll ever try is your own. The foundation would continue its work long after I was gone. Sarah's name would forever be associated with the worst kind of family betrayal. Mark would die in prison, forgotten and unmourned. And I would spend whatever years I had left doing what I should have been doing all along, using my skills, my resources, and my experience to protect people who needed protection. If you're watching my story and you see yourself in my situation, if you have family members who see your love as weakness, your generosity as opportunity, your trust as foolishness, remember this: you are not helpless. You have power you haven't used yet. You have resources you haven't discovered yet. You have strength you haven't needed yet. And sometimes, the people who hurt you the most end up giving you the greatest gift of all. They show you exactly who you are when you decide to fight back. Sarah thought she was stealing my money. Instead, she gave me back my life.